you're going to be investing with Bernie. But he would take in enough new clients that he could pay off the previous, investors when they wanted to cash out. He could pay them off. And so everything looked like it was good until the market turned around back in 2007, 2008, and too many people wanted their money back. And then he didn't have it. And that's what caused him to collapse. So, but yeah, there's a lot of similarities there between, crooks like him and crooks like Amway as far as appearing to be legitimate. And unless you educate yourself and understand it, and even the SEC was bamboozled, the Security and Exchange Commission, because they just thought he was a good guy and they didn't look close enough, even though there was a person that was serving it up on a silver platter, as they say. He was giving the SEC all these details of why Bernie was operating an illegal pyramid, but they just didn't absorb it. They just,
the problem was that man wasn't as well spoken as what Bernie was. And he didn't have millions of dollars, therefore he didn't have the credibility that Bernie had. Actually, the Nazi, I can't think of the guy's name, but the Nazi propaganda minister used to say that people get away with big lies. It's easier to get caught on a small lie than a big lie, because once something becomes that big a lie, it's hard for people to comprehend. So if there was a small-time trader making crazy promises, working out of a little tiny house, people would call that out. But when you've got a guy with billions of dollars, it's harder to imagine that he could be pulling off a scam. And
right.
Amway's a bit the same. The bigger it gets, the harder it is for people to imagine that it's a scam. They think, well, this big, it must be legit.
Exactly, like plastering your name Amway on the stadium. That's a big lie. I mean, the name's not a lie. It's just what's really happening behind the scenes is the lie. So, yep. So anyway, so Tim Sales also talked in this video about targeting certain markets with his water bottle. He had a water bottle in the video as an example, and he was talking about survival and camping oriented people, and to, don't just try to sell it to anybody, but to target your customer base so that you can be successful in selling these things. Well, I don't know about you, but number one, I don't know too many of those types of people. Number two, I think the population of those people, the percentage, is really tiny. And if that's all you market to, it's not going to take too many distributors to saturate that customer base.
Exactly, yeah.
So, to me, that was just a poor example of trying to say how you should retail products. Of course, with Amway, hopefully everybody uses toothpaste and deodorant. And so that's what they often talk about with their products is, well, these are things that everybody always uses, so it's not a big deal. We don't have to target a little tiny market to sell our products. And in theory, that's true. The problem is they're overpriced. And so it's not as easy as it sounds. But anyway, I just thought that was a really bad example to teach people how to market a product. A little sliver of a market just doesn't make sense to me. So any comments further on that one, Glenn or Peter? Well, Peter, do you have any other comments along the way?
Nope. You guys are doing just fine.
Okay, great.
The concept of just the naming of the Amway Stadium just makes perfectly good sense, because if you're going to a basketball game or a rock concert or Disney on Ice or wherever it might be, and especially since it's in Orlando, where there's much foot traffic from international, just makes sense. So it's brilliant genius. Back to you.
Actually, yeah, in Australia, the Amway actually did have some ads on television in the 90s. Some of them can actually be found on YouTube, but they stopped doing that, I reckon, in about 98. You guys still there?
Yep, we're here. Scott, are you there?
Oh, sorry. So Amway was advertising on television for a brief period in the 90s, and they've since stopped. But with Tim Sales, Tim's very aware of the fact that people aren't selling products like he was talking about, that water bottle. He knows that they're selling the idea of becoming a millionaire from doing a minimal amount of work.
Yeah, he's got to be he's got to be aware of that. I agree, Glenn. And I'm sorry, I was on mute before, so I had a really good speech. You guys missed it.
Okay.
But yeah, I think that Amway, I think they did maybe a little bit of television advertising back in the 80s and 90s, maybe even earlier. But most of their advertising in the past has been in magazines. That's where I saw most of their advertising. Of course, magazines aren't what they used to be either, right? Because everything's going online. So there's definitely much less advertising from Amway than there used to be. And even back in that day, there wasn't nearly as much as a traditional company, like a Coca-Cola, as our example for tonight, would be out there advertising. But it's definitely less than it used to be, no doubt about it.
Actually, the ad they had on Australian television pretty much sums up Amway, what they're about. There was no mention of products or what the business was. There was an excited kid in like a palace of a house, biggest house you've ever seen, excited as his dad's coming home with some tickets for a trip. So even when they were advertising, they weren't telling you what the products were. They weren't telling you anything what the business was. It was just about this guy, because he was in Amway, he was in a palace of a house, and he was about to go on a trip. And he was excited that his dad had got the tickets.
Yep, that's what's called selling the dream. Exactly. That's what they do with the sales and marketing. It's not just Amway. I think almost all MLMs sell the dream, the future wealth prospect, to just sort of distract you and make it all about that so that you get involved. And then as you start noticing things, they've kind of set the hook. And some people quit, some don't, but that's their shtick. That's how they operate. Very, very, very true. And it really hasn't changed much. There's been some very minor, technique changes, but they're not worth talking about, really. It's really the same thing it's always been. Yeah,
I don't think it's changed even slightly. The only difference is now you used to order over the phone or for a catalog. Now you order on the internet, and of course
right.
they turn that into this is cutting edge, state of the art e-commerce. We're doing something that nobody else is doing, e-commerce in the early 2000s, late 90s. But it was the same as what it always was. It's just you ordered your products from a different place.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Now, sales was also kind of two-faced on another issue where, he was talking about how CEOs of non-MLMs don't market the company's products, which is true. But then if you're in Amway, if you're at the platinum or above level, there's no retail sales requirements. Once you hit platinum, that requirement goes away. Of course, very few people are at that level compared to the other, 99+%. But there's not much difference between Amway and that company. And he was trying to draw a distinction. In another part of the video, he was talking about, he was sort of comparing a traditional company in structure to an MLM. And he said, look, in a traditional company, you've got, all these CEOs and, vice presidents, department heads and supervisors. And then you have a separate, relatively small sales force. And the distributors in an MLM are that sales force for Amway. Amway does all the other things, that a normal company does as far as, supplying the products and all that goes into that. And then the distributors are the sales force, to kind of show. And I think that was a fairly accurate depiction of a comparison. But then when he started talking about CEOs of non-MLMs not selling products and trying to make that look different from an MLM, at least in the case of Amway, I don't know about other MLMs. Maybe they still require retail sales by their top-level distributors. And I think the thinking behind that is that when you get to the platinum, you're so busy, supporting and growing your own group, you don't have time to sell at retail. Although when you get to that point, theoretically, you have retail customers, so why not continue the requirement? And I think the real reason they don't continue the requirement is because, at least again theoretically, all the downline that don't have retail sales, all of that bonus goes up to the platinum, and that way the platinum can stop the rise of that bonus going up the chain, and it can stop at the platinum level versus going above them. I think